Here's here's my QI walkthrough. I was originally gonna reverse engineer my QI thing and just sell everything and rebuild it from scratch just so you could see the walkthrough. But I'd rather not do that, especially this season, just since it's the end of the championship. So I'm actually gonna I'll do a mock-up in my main city, and it's actually a little easier that way too, just because I've got more space to work with and play through a few different scenarios. Let's check some of the stats here though real quick before we jump over. So roughly 400 of each resource in the bar. I also have 442 goods printed, which is enough for another expansion. If I do need to plant more towers for fighting, I don't need that currently though. I'm able to fight with pretty minimal losses, so I don't really need that additional attack right now. So I'm going to save the goods until a goods donation mode, or if I do need more towers, whichever comes first. Plenty of troops. So let's, on a quick note there, I don't start printing ballista until like my third or fourth collection. It's mostly just archers at the beginning and then legionnaires at the very end. Let's see. Map. So before I even build my initial city, I use all of my actions on the map first, because all those early nodes are coin and supply rewards. So before I even start my initial settlement, I like to know how many resources I actually have to work with. That's how I've always done it. I don't think that's going to be as much of a variable in the future, though, with the changes that they're coming out with. So I'm going to show you both variations, what I've been doing and what I plan to do going forward now that they're changing that. Early on, you can auto battle ballista combinations with just the straight 8 ballista, and you'll occasionally get one injured. But if you start out with 9 or 10, which I usually do, I think I'm getting, I don't remember where the bonus one is coming from. I think it's one of the temporary ascended buildings. But if you start off with 9 or 10, the one occasionally injured ballista, you can just substitute and you'll run out of actions before you need to replace that troop again. And then for horse combinations, I use 4 ballista, 4 archers, and manual battle. You will injure or kill pretty much 2 or 3 of those archers on the initial set of incursions, which is still enough to manual battle 4 and 4, because you'll have 7 archers left. But in order to auto battle against horse combos, I like 8 archers. So before I actually start auto battling against horse combinations, I print a couple sets of archers first. And ballistas, like I said, I don't worry about until later, because you can keep auto battling with ballista against ballista combos, and that'll last you for a while. So I'm going to jump into edit mode. I guess, actually, real quick before we do that, a couple things to make a note of. I have a bunch of these ascended oink things, which is giving me a ton of supplies at the start. So I'm going to show you what you could do with that, depending on how many ascended buildings you have. But I'm also going to look at what you would do with just bare bones, exactly what you start with, and not a penny more. I also have some of these harvest hubs, which are permanent effects of some additional supplies at the beginning. Same thing there. I'll look at what you could do with that if you have those buildings, but what I would recommend if you have no head start in QI whatsoever. The oink things, I like the non-ascended version enough to justify just planting all of them ascended right away, as a replacement to Feta once the ascended version expires. The royal carriage, the non-ascended version, is actually garbage, so I'm only going to plant 1 or 2 of these at a time and then just delete them when they expire. So that's kind of what I'm starting out QI with. I am getting some coins from the Vagabond library as well. So I'll look at what I've been doing with the resources that I am starting with. But once these expire, there's no supply boost there or goods boost or anything. The only permanent effect would come from Harvest Hub and Vagabond Library. So let's get into edit mode real quick. Alright, so here's my QI mockup, and we're starting with 12 wide, 16 tall. Okay. I'm going to use this group of buildings right here as a town hall marker. It's 6 tall, 7 wide. I'm going to use that as the town hall marker. My actual town hall I'm going to set up in little different scenarios. But I'm going to use this layout to kind of mark that progress permanently as we go. Okay. In this example, the Colossus and escutcheons kind of represent permanent boundaries that I don't really ever try and extend past in QI, where the Metro represent expansions that I try to get at least most of throughout the season. So I'll explain that as we go. Slide over here. This is kind of the original setup, and I forget who made the original guide to it. Someone from a different server. We'll call it Bob's system or whatever. Okay. This is essentially what Bob's system accomplished. Bob has 3 amphitheaters in his original system. He has 4 houses, and I don't have a whole lot of 4x3 buildings in my city, so I'm going to use these Earth's Guardians as butcher representations. You've just got to visualize a 4th row on that. So, and this is actually true to the footprint that you would start with in your QI city, so your boundary would be right here. You just got to visualize that those are butchers. So Bob's system starts out with the same hardware. I use 3 extra roads at the beginning of my layout. But the hardware is the exact same either way. The only reason why I'm using those extra 3 roads is that Bob's city, so Bob recommends getting these first 2 expansions with shards. I agree with Bob there. And then Bob moves his town hall up 3 squares. Right. So Bob now has room for a butcher behind the town hall, and then a combination of butcher and amphitheater, or a pair of houses in front of the town hall. So the spacing of his town hall is 3 behind, 7 in front, 5 to the side. So we've got 5, 4, 7, and 3. The reason why I space mine like this, it's an extra 3 roads at the beginning, but it puts my town hall in the vertically correct position where it will stay for the rest of the season. So I don't have to rearrange that multiple times. So this is 4 and 6. The spacing of 3 and 7 that Bob is using is really hard to organize anything besides butchers and farms with, right? Because vertically, really what you're going to be planning is houses, which are pairs of 2, right? 2 doesn't really go into 7 very well. And then tailors. For most of the season, we'll start off with butchers, but by day 2 we've already got some tailors planted. So now we're working with pairs of 2 and 4, and you can see that vertical spacing is just going to work a lot better in the long run. These roads just end up getting repurposed by the second phase, so I'll explain that. Horizontal spacing, I have the same 5 and 4 as Bob. The difference is I changed this horizontal spacing by the second collection, whereas Bob keeps the 4 and 5 horizontal spacing until like his 6th phase or something like that. And I'll talk more about that later, but at Bob's 6th phase, he's got like 30 empty squares versus the 4 empty squares in my city. So, and I think a lot of that has to do with his original town hall placement. It's not so much the buildings that he's using, it's just the original town hall placement ends up with a ton of empty space, okay? So let's adjust, I'm going to adjust this into my permanent layout. Town hall is now 4 squares up in the back and 6 squares in the front, okay? Eventually, Bob will tell you to get this 3rd expansion as well. I agree with Bob. Shortly after I get that expansion, I shift my town hall 1 square to the right, and this is the location where my town hall stays for the rest of the season. His moves multiple times throughout his different phases. This is where my town hall stays for the rest of the season, though. But in the first 2 phases, this 3rd expansion does help. But I leave my town hall still horizontally spaced the same way, okay? And I'll explain that as we go. From here, we're going to come off the top left corner, plant 3 roads. Come off the bottom left corner, plant 4 roads. 2 squares in from the right corner, plant 3 roads, sorry. And then we're going to plant 2 roads back here, okay? And this is step number 1. Let's look at what we're setting up here. That's these roads right here. So room for a butcher, right? Butcher right there. Butcher or amphitheater in this back corner. A couple different ways you can do that I'll look at. And then the same butcher and house placement over here. So this is Bob's guide. Bob changed the system, obviously, after Bob's guide was released, and they gave you 25,000 supplies at the beginning to where you had enough resources to plant a Tailor, right? That wasn't included in Bob's guide, but it also wasn't an option in Bob's guide. So Bob had his 3 amphitheaters. He's using the 2 expansions. He did not include the 3rd expansion. I will come back to that. And he didn't include a Tailor. But the Tailor wasn't really an option at that point. Now, everyone has the ability to plant at least 1 Tailor on opening day, regardless of the hardware that you have in your main city. Everyone has that ability. I have been doing that, and I think most other people have also been doing that, is to plant a Tailor on opening day. And the thinking there is, obviously we want to get a triumphant arch as soon as possible, right? Because once we can get rid of these, it takes 4 amphitheaters to provide the same happiness that a 2x3 arch is giving us, right? So common sense says that the sooner we can get this arch planted, the better off we are. The obstacle to that is our supply shortage. So it's kind of intuitive to say, well, if I can omit 1 butcher and plant 1 Tailor at opening, I'm going to be a little bit ahead of the 8 ball on the 2nd collection. That's the way I've been doing it, and I think that does work, but I probably won't be doing it that way again in the future. So I'll go over that here in a second. Before we get into that, though, let's look at this 3rd expansion. Bob's guide also didn't really have any QI boosts getting factored into the setup of main city. I get enough goods at the opening in order to actually buy 1 expansion with goods even before I plant a goods building, just from the ascended buildings in my main city. So I do plant that 3rd expansion and then shift my amphitheater into that 3rd square. Currently, our population, um, we have 200 population provided, so 400 demand, and then we're consuming 200 population worth of butchers. So we don't have enough population to plant another butcher, but I would plant one or two more houses in these areas, just to get the extra coins at the beginning of the next collection, delete the two houses that you planted, and then finish collecting as normal. You've got to be down to like 60% happiness in order to not break even on planting a house. So on a side note for that, I actually like using a surplus of houses as filler for a couple different reasons. It helps you rack up coin faster in order to get that farm faster, and it also gives you more actions. So between the two, I'd actually rather have a couple extra houses, and then just delete the house in order to achieve happiness balance, versus having to delete a butcher and a house and then plant a fourth amphitheater in that location. Does that make sense? So either way, I start off with enough goods to buy the first expansion with goods. There's 30 goods. I think I start with 36. I do use goods in a specific order, which I'll talk more about later, but I always start with jewelry consumption, then cloth, then iron. And the primary reason for that is that jewelry is the only 4 tall building, so the replacement to that would be a Tailor. But as your city develops, you don't want to be deleting your Tailors in order to plant a goods building. So as your city develops, it's better to have the 3x4 dimension that you can swap in and out with a butcher. Does that make sense? Having that third expansion also prepares our city for this left to right shift that I talked about. We're not going to do that right away, but having that third expansion out of the way makes it easier to jump into the next step. So after my ascended stuff expires, I'm still actually going to buy that third expansion just with shards. So currently I'm spending 30 goods, 150 shards, and then 200 shards. So it's 350 shards plus the 30 goods. If you just do the 2 expansions, it's 100 plus 150, so 250 total. No goods spent though. So you'll have, which is kind of not a good thing actually. If you start off with 36 goods in each category, it's good to just spend one of those categories immediately, because you won't get enough resources on your second or third collection to print both of these expansions, right? You'll be able to print one, but not the second. So if you use one group of goods right away to print your first category, you'll be able to print enough of a different type of good to complete your fourth expansion. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so let's take a step back and talk about the Tailor possibility, now that that is a thing. So we have a butcher here. We wouldn't be able to plant a Tailor here because we don't have the population for it. So here's what I've been doing. I start off with, I think it's right at 50,000 supplies for start, and that's a permanent effect. That has nothing to do with the ascended buildings that I have. So from the start, I have enough supplies to plant 2 Tailors right away. Here's what I've been doing. I get the 3 expansions, like I talked about. Right now, our butchers and our houses are at parity, so there's no population difference one way or the other. I removed 2 butchers from this original strategy. That gives me enough population for 1 Tailor, correct? I need another house for the population for my second Tailor. So we're going to move one of these butchers to the back. This is 4x4 space, so that 3x4 butcher fits in there perfectly. Now I have enough population to add my second Tailor. And from here, I just add a piece of road with another house and a seventh house. And at the start of the next collection, I don't have happiness parity, so I've got to delete 2 houses at the beginning, and then delete 1 butcher and plant another amphitheater in order to complete the collection. That's how I've been doing it, and I don't think it's wrong. The goal here is to accelerate your supply production with the tailors. I don't think it's wrong. That's how I've been doing it, and it does give me the results that I want. But I'm gonna come back to this and show you a different way that I've been thinking about recently, how I'll probably do it in the future. So from here, we delete 2 houses, right? Plant the amphitheater, finish our collection, and then from here, I replant 2 of these houses, so I'm back down to unhappiness, and then build and rush my jewelry, okay? Build and rush my jewelry in order to get the 4th expansion, okay? From here, and this is a first collection, so build and rush gives you, it doesn't give you enough to buy a triumphant arch on the first collection, but that's not really my goal. My goal is to get this 4th expansion, which if you're starting off with 30 towards that good and you only need 90, you only need 60,000 of each resource in order to complete that expansion there. Makes sense? So from here, we jump into delete the goods building, right? We're going to delete the goods building. But from here, we jump into a different layout that once I get that 4th expansion, I don't plant anything. I rearrange my whole city and then start planting, okay? Let me set that up. Okay, so after we gain this 4th expansion, we now have enough resources, we have enough resources to print the 4th expansion as well as 1 more Tailor. So we're going to slide our town hall over to its permanent location, and from here the town hall will never move again in my system. All of these roads will get rearranged, so let's just pull those off the map for now. And we've created this 4th expansion. So from here, this town hall will never move from this location. Our roads are now coming off this side of the town hall and over 4. Down 2. Over 2. And down 3. Okay? And these roads are mostly going to stay the same throughout the evolution of this as well. Sorry, this group was wrong. That actually goes there. And then this road goes there. We are going to end up with 1 more road in the back corner right there. Let's move the town hall into this new layout. So this would be the road in the back corner there. And this is going to become a butcher right here, okay? We're going to add the 2 tailors from the original layout, right? 1, 2. We're going to add those 2 tailors right there. And we're going to add the 3rd tailor that we have enough resources for right there, okay? So here's my town hall. Here's my 1, 2, 3 tailors. 1, 2, 3 tailors. There's a 4x3 that represents a butcher. There's my butcher up in that corner. We're going to add another butcher and another tile house. So part of the difference between my strategy and Bob's strategy is that Bob starts upgrading his housing pretty early on. So he, like, within the first two steps, delete a tile house and plant a cottage, right? Bob starts making those changes pretty early on. There's a few problems with that. So let's break that down. Tile house gives, I think it's like, we'll call it 10K, plus or minus, and it kind of depends on your supply boost. Provides 10K, costs 2.5K to build. So net profit of 7.5K per tile, assuming your happiness is on point, right? Cottage costs 6K to build, gives 20K. So theoretically, we have a net profit of 14K, right? But we also lose the 10K from the tile that we just replaced. So 14K gross minus the 10K, because we just deleted that tile. So it's not like you're adding a cottage, you're replacing something that already gives half of that amount with something that gives a little bit more. So our net profit now is down to 4K. Make sense? Plus you're burning up 25,000 supplies in order to plant that. So over time, the cottage is a good investment, right? Because you're making that 20K every collection. But to do that early on, you're actually losing potentially 3.5 thousand coins, as well as the 25,000 supplies, just to build it. And you don't break even on the coins until the next collection, and you won't break even on the supplies at all until you plant a farm, right? So that's the problem with the cottage upgrade. Key difference in my system is that instead of using the supplies and coins to upgrade your tile houses into a cottage, I use the supplies and coins to buy another expansion and then just plant another tile house. And if you remember the math we just did on the tile house, planting a second tile house is actually 3,500 coins more profitable than upgrading one tile house to a cottage. And this is at the beginning. Obviously, as the settlement progresses, it is more cost effective to have the upgraded housing and the upgraded production buildings. But early on, when you're trying to gain momentum, it's actually better to spend those resources on expansions and just duplicate the cheap buildings. Make sense so far? Okay, so from here, we're gonna transfer all of our houses into this bottom row. This is where that 6 height versus the 6 and 4 spacing, that's where that comes in, versus the 3 and 7 spacing that Bob starts off with. Okay. Adding the third Tailor means that we are going to need one more house, which I've added down here. This would be number 7. Yes. From here, we've got a butcher right here. This butcher goes at the very bottom, like so. And it would be 4 wide, but the butcher itself is also tucked in 1 square from the corner there. Oops, I don't need that road. So there's 3 by 4. There's 3 by 4, but there's a gap of 1 by 3 to the corner. Next butcher, 3 by 4. And then final butcher right here, 3 by 4. Amphitheater, amphitheater, amphitheater. The nice thing about this layout, and especially over the way that Bob designs it is that now these group of SO or the amphitheaters this is a group of 12 wide, 4 tall. So that's perfect for 3 amphitheaters or 4 combinations of 3 wide buildings like the arches and the Tailors that we're ultimately trying to build there. Versus having this group of amphitheaters on the right side where that 4 wide is not really a dimension that you're using a whole lot until you start building a farm. And even then you don't have enough to justify that entire side of the layout being 4 wide. So this is what that would look like. And we've got a butcher in the back here. Okay. This is immediately after your first collection. So you use all the resources in your first collection to plant and rush a goods building by your 4th expansion, and then reorganize your city like this. I don't rush the Tailor because after we buy the 4th expansion and reorganize, we are going to add a Tailor. I don't rush it. I just delay my subsequent collection by an hour and catch everything at the same time. On a side note, I never really did figure out how that guy was getting the immediate collection an hour later after this builds. I never figured that out. That's the advantage to his system. I've never figured it out, and it doesn't happen in my method. But it's also, to me, it's also really not that critical. After I'll kind of break it down around phase 5 or 6, and you can see that by phase 5 or 6, I'm absolutely blowing his layout out of the water in terms of output. So the expedited shipping on fucking 1 Tailor and 1 tile house is really not worth the overall subpar system, if that makes sense. Okay, so at this point we're done. This is our city now. We're done with this collection. Spend the rest of your actions fighting or whatever. We still don't have ballistas or archers yet, so still manual battling against horse combinations. You can still auto battle against ballistas. Here's where the upcoming QI changes, I think, will actually favor my system. I think a lot of you guys have been kind of compelled to plant a ballista camp earlier on in your city than you should, just because by fucking Friday morning you're already on level 6 difficulty, right? So you need those extra troops. Whereas Goon Squad, we're doing essentially a level a day, maybe every day and a half. I think we're on level 7 right now, so 10 days, 7 levels. We're not quite as fast as the 1 level per day mark, but there's definitely more time in the beginning to cultivate your city before having to fight fucking balls to the wall and burn through 3 troops per battle, right? So I think the new upcoming QI changes will actually kind of favor my system where, yeah, you don't have a ballista right now, but you also don't need it because you still are on level 1. Regardless of how fast you guys complete level 1, you'll be able to infinitely farm the end of that level. Does that make sense? So there's really no reason to jump into ballistas right away. Ballista, you can auto battle against ballista up until like level 3 or 4 if you have even halfway decent QI stats. So you've got 3 days to really start cranking those out, in other words. So this is the end of collection for now, okay? The biggest differences here is that instead of deleting and upgrading, so Bob's system has you delete a butcher, plant your 3rd Tailor, right? And then delete a tile house and build a cottage. That's Bob's system, right? We've already looked at the math on deleting the tile house versus the cottage. The math on the butcher is pretty self-explanatory. You end up spending 8,000 coins, recuperating none of the coins, and then yes, you double your supply production on the upcoming collection, but it also costs double the supplies to build it in the first place. So you don't even break even on the supply side until the 2nd collection. My system is to use those resources to plant this fourth expansion, and instead of upgrading the butcher and the tile house, I just add another tile house and another butcher, okay? That's the main difference. So let's jump to the collection that comes after this. We've doubled our coin collection, right? And we've also doubled our supply collection from the original layout, correct? But the difference is we haven't invested coins or supplies in order to do that. In other words, we haven't spent 25,000 supplies to plant the Tailor in order to double our supply production. We just built a second butcher. Make sense? So we've doubled our coin and supply production on both of these groups. Next up is the arch, right? So we're going to get rid of this first stage, two stage of ages. We're going to plant an arch and a Tailor. Tailor goes there. Get rid of the second amphitheater. Arch goes there. So here we have obviously some empty space around this arch. Bob's system has the same amount of empty space at this stage, but he's using, his layout is configured differently, and there's a butcher that's organized into this amount of squares, right? I actually kind of prefer the extra two houses at this point for a couple reasons. Remember at the beginning we said we can get down to 80% happiness and still make a profit on the coin collection of two houses. Plus it adds to our action accumulation. The other trade-off is that if we had repurposed this space for a butcher, we're investing coins, not regenerating coins from it. And at this point you can see that I already have three Tailors, so my supply production is getting pretty healthy, but I'm still just using tile houses. So if we invest our coins to plant another butcher, we're not getting coins in return, and the supplies we don't really need because we've already taken the time to upgrade 1, 2, 3, and now 4 Tailors, right? The other disadvantage with planting the butcher is that you've got to delete the butcher and spend even more coins to plant an amphitheater and recapture the happiness that you need. Whereas from this system, we can just delete the 2 extra houses after collection and reach the happiness balance that we need without having to spend more coins and plant an amphitheater in addition to that. Does that make sense? This is about it for I guess this would be collection. There's the beginning, then we buy expansion number 4 on the first collection, so this would be after the second collection. We have an amphitheater and a 4th Tailor, okay? And that's about it for that. We'll write that on this is number 2 collection. So on the third collection, we have 1 butcher, 2 butcher, 3 butcher, 4, 5, 6 butchers, giving 10k, 60k. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 Tailors, giving 20. Is 80k. So we've got 140k in supplies, and then we've got 10 houses giving 10k is 100k, and you should still, at this point, you still should have a couple remaining resources from just your original setup, plus whatever tiles you're hitting. So collection number 3, we've got 100k plus, let's call it 10k and change, and then 140k is enough as it is, but you've probably got some leftover supplies as well. So collection number 3, here's how that goes. We're going to eliminate our third amphitheater, delete these houses. Don't need this road anymore. We're going to plant our second triumphant arch. Tailor number 5. And you probably won't have enough resources to plant Tailor number 6 just yet. If you do, go ahead and put it in right there, because that is where it will permanently end up. Probably don't have enough for that though on this collection, so just leave a house there as filler if you need to. Ideally, if you're hitting the map and actually collecting coins and supplies on those nodes, you'd be able to plant that 6th Tailor. For now, let's just assume that we can't. Okay. That's about it for the substantial changes on the back end, like the big investments. But we're gonna reconfigure this bottom left corner on the same collection. This is collection number 3. This one is actually pretty important, so pay attention. This butcher will stay. These butchers we can delete now. This butcher stays. And now we're going to redo this road pattern into its permanent position as well. So this bottom left corner is now 4x4. We'll leave one butcher in here. And even if you do somehow miraculously have enough supplies to, sorry, this is actually here. Even if you do have enough supplies to build another Tailor in this location, I still leave a butcher there kind of indefinitely. If I do have enough supplies to plant another Tailor, it's actually here with this road and another house. This pattern right here doesn't usually happen until my collection number 4, but that kind of depends on the individual city and, like I said, how much you're getting from the map as you go along. This change doesn't usually happen until number 4 for me though. But this is 8 squares wide, right? So we don't really need to force that immediately. We can keep the pair of 1 butcher, 2 butcher, and then 3 butcher, right? This 3rd butcher will stay a butcher for a while though, so I'll explain that. Tile house, and from here we're going to build our archery range, okay? This butcher, I don't actually plant that one right away. I build a ballista. I build my first ballista camp as well as an archery range on this collection. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess we had 1 down here, so let's just shift that up here. Eventually you'll replace this with a pair of Tailor plus 1 house in the middle. But for now, let's just assume that you don't have the resources to do that. We're just going to leave 2 butchers right there. This whole top section, though, is in its final finished permanent location, okay? I'm going to pause this part real quick. I'm going to jump over to my QI city and show you how that is when it's permanent. Okay, so we're in QI now. We have Tailor, 2 arches, and 2 Tailors. Tailor, Tailor, arch, arch, Tailor. Over time, we're going to replace the the butcher that we had in the back corner with a farm, and we're going to replace the pair of the house and the butcher that we had in the bottom right corner with another farm. But we've got 2 Tailors, house, house. Here's the combination I was just talking about, the combination of Tailor and house in the middle. And then the top group as well as the housing right here. And that pattern is getting set up on phase 3. And the roads, the town hall position never changes, the roads never change. The only thing that we do from there is just change the building type. These are now villas instead of tile houses, right? So let's go back into edit mode. So here's the baby version of the finished product, right? We still have the same Tailor, 2 arches, 2 Tailors, 2 Tailors, 2 houses. We end up changing this bottom combination, but the roads stay exactly the same, right? And then we plant our ballista camp and our archery range at the same time. I let them cook. I don't rush them. I just delay my next collection by an hour to resynchronize everything. I don't really spend shards on rushing stuff, with a few exceptions, like rushing the goods camp from phase 1 to in order to set up our permanent system in phase 2. That's about the only time I actually rush stuff. Okay, so after the ballistas are cooked, we're gonna run 1 repetition. At this point, you should only be on level 2 or 3 in the map, so you really don't. I mean, the 9, 10 ballistas that you start with should be enough to auto battle pretty consistently, and get 1 or 2 injured occasionally, but pretty unlikely that any of them are going to die. So once you start auto battling in number 3, none of them are dying. You don't really need to replace them. You just need to exchange them frequently enough to keep up with your actions, okay? So 1 set of ballistas. Spend the rest of your resources printing as many archers as you can, because these will start dying on auto battle starting in level 2 or 3-ish, okay? But we're not going to delete the archery camp. Part of the reason why I have my roads set up like this is to keep the archer camp there, and it fits perfectly in this little pocket, and then plant a tile house, right? So it builds immediately. We've got our upcoming collection is going to be delayed by an hour because we had to let the camps cook before we did that. So next collection is going to be delayed by an hour, but the tile house is going to be ready to produce when we get to that point, right? The reason why I keep that archer planted, they're, first of all, they're cheaper to build. So they're actually half the cost as a ballista to build. Plus, they're the ones that are actually getting killed most often in the early levels on auto battle. Once you get into the higher levels, you're losing equal amounts of ballista per ballista pairing, but you should also have enough coin and supplies in order to replenish those as fast as possible. But in the beginning, 35,000 per repetition of troops is a lot of resources, right? Versus the 17,000 to print archers. The other nice thing about not deleting this is that it saves us the 5,000 coin as well as the 2,500 supply to replant it, as well as the hour it took to build it. And now it's not in our way. It doesn't affect our population or anything. It's not in our way. So every time we make a change, so after we print the ballista we need, we'll plug another butcher in here, okay? And then on the next collection, even with the 2 arches, if you have upgraded any of these houses at this point, which usually I do, I usually have 1 cottage at this point. Even with the 2 arches, you might still need an amphitheater to finish your collection. So this will delete again, plant the amphitheater to collect, right? And then before we finish our collection, we're going to delete the amphitheater. We're going to plant something in here eventually, right? But here's where you can just slide that archery range down to that road, print a couple more repetitions of archers, move the archer back into its thing. Eventually we are going to replant a butcher here, but for now we can make these other changes to the city from the collection resources and just slide the archer back into place before we fill that pocket back in. Make sense? So on the 4th collection, I print a few more archers usually, and then I print my second category of goods building. This will be the cloth mill, the weaving mill. I print that, and at this point, now that our arches have been purchased, we should be getting around, let's see, let's do the math real quick. Should be around 200,000 of each resource at collection though. So we've got 5 Tailors times 20 is 100k supplies, plus this would have been a butcher at the beginning, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 butchers times 10 is 150, or sorry, 50, so 150 total. And we've also got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tile houses, spitting out 10k equals 120 total. So 110 supplies, 120 coin should be enough to print one more repetition of the second category of goods. Remember, we're trying to piggyback off of the goods that you start with originally, instead of spending your 30 jewelry to buy an expansion and then planting a jewelry production in order to get the next expansion. You're already starting off 20 goods in the hole, essentially. So reuse the second type of goods building in order to print our 5th expansion, okay? And the 5th expansion is gonna work like this. We have a butcher there now. We're gonna shift that back 4. Extend this road. Get the town hall out of there. And we're going to add 2 more tile houses back here. The end goal is to have a tile house one tile house, and then your triumphant arch number 3 behind that. That's the end goal. But I guarantee you will not have enough resources to do that on this collection, so we're going to use 2 tile houses as a placeholder here. Delete the goods building, right? We had a goods building here. In order to accomplish this, we're going to delete the goods building now and replant another butcher. Even if you do have the resources to make this a tailor, still don't do it yet. Just leave this as a butcher, because we are going to need to print more ballista at some point, print another batch of goods at some point. So it's just easier if it's a deletable butcher. Plus, as you start upgrading houses, even with the 3rd triumphant arch in the back, as you start upgrading houses, you may occasionally need to delete that butcher to put it in an amphitheater just to maintain your happiness. So don't upgrade this at all. Okay, that was collection 4, so we're on to collection 5 now. This is where progress starts accelerating pretty quickly. At this point, we've done pretty much all of our big purchases, right? We've bought 2 arches so far. We've already upgraded, we have 5 tailors now, so we've already upgraded a bunch of our butchers. We're down to 4 butchers on the bottom, 5 tailors at the top. Butcher number 5, sorry, at the top there, so 5 and 5. Bought our arches though, as well as 1, 2, 3 expansions with goods, right? So those are pretty hefty investments. At this point, I still have mostly tile houses. I might have 1 or 2 cottages at this point. But this is where it actually accelerates pretty quickly, because now the upgrades that we're making are actually pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. So we're going to remove 2 butchers, plant 2 tailors, and again, the part of the fundamental problem with Bob's process is that he's deleting a tile house and then planting a cottage, right? So he's upgrading his housing, but he's also losing half of that coin collection from the house that he removed in the first place. So here's where my system really starts becoming different. Instead of upgrading that house, we're just going to relocate it and plant the upgraded house. So now we're not losing the coin collection from the tile house. In other words, we're not deleting it in order to plant the cottage. We're still keeping the tile house, and we're adding the cottage production to it as well. From this point, you should have enough resources to plant and print your ballistas and actually get a pretty healthy run out of it, this collection. So this would be collection number 5. We're going to add our last 2 tailors, update a couple of houses, just depends on your budget. This is still a butcher, remember. And from here, most of our collection can actually go towards printing. You could probably do 4 repetitions of ballista. So 40 ballista. Alternatively, you could delete this tile house like we talked about, shift the butcher up, and plant your 3rd triumphant arch. That's the other option, but probably not necessary at this stage or convenient with the map, because at this point we're probably on level 3 or 4 by now, and we are going to start needing some more ballista. So this would be one of those cases where you would delete the butcher at the beginning of collection because we don't have that 3rd arch, plant a amphitheater to do the collection, delete the amphitheater, plant the ballistas, harvest a few ballistas, delete the ballistas, and replant the butcher. Makes sense? And then this way we can keep auto battling. Next collection, we'll add that amphitheater for sure on the 6th collection. We'll have 3 amphitheaters now. Okay, so this is collection number 6, or 3 arches. Sorry. That's the biggest change here. And at this point, we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 20, 140k supplies from the tailors. We've got 1 butcher, 2 butcher, 3 butcher. And then we've got 1 house. Well, I guess before we plant the arch, we would have 2 back there. So 2 houses, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 houses times 10 would be 150. Let's add 20, assuming that a couple of those have been upgraded to cottages at this point. So we're at essentially 170, over 170, right? And remember, by the time we collect 170 over 170, delete 1 house, and then plant your arch. We still have 70k of each resource left to play with. But remember, we already ran 4 repetitions of ballista the round before it, right? So we still have 70 left to play with. Here's where it gets pretty versatile. From here, I probably don't need the ballista, but I'm going to delete this butcher again, plant a ballista. There's no reason to rush it though, and that's where this system starts kind of snowballing. There's no reason to rush this ballista because I already have 4 repetitions in inventory, so assuming I'm even halfway decent at QI in terms of stats, I should be able to auto battle with 40 new ballista plus the 10 that I had to start with, and maybe lose 1 or 2 out of every 50,000 actions or whatever. So you might be losing 10 a day tops by the time you're at level 4 on the map. So use the remaining of your collection to print a few more repetitions of ballista, delete the ballista, and then plant another goods building. Again, no reason to rush this. We're already 3 hours past our collection point at this stage. I mean, we've added the arch that still isn't cooked yet. Plus waited an hour for the ballistas. So there's no point in rushing this at this stage in time. But on the next collection, now that we have that third arch, we don't need to delete this butcher and plant an amphitheater to maintain happiness, right? With this third arch established and mostly tile houses for population, we have more than enough happiness to actually leave this goods building in place. It's already built for us, so collect your entire city as normal. Print another expansion worth of goods. Delete the goods building, plant a butcher, okay? And from here, let's jump up into this city. For now, we've been working with this 4x4 grid. We've also opened up this this top corner, right? This is where we're at on the permanent city reference. We've opened up that top corner. We've eliminated all of our amphitheaters. Permanently, we have no need for them anymore. Those are all tailors and arches. And then we have another arch on the top now. So we just finished printing. This would be pattern number 7 right now that we're looking at. This is collection number 7. So we've printed another expansion worth of goods. From here, I try to expand on the left side where these metros are as much as possible, just because that's where these roads are terminating, right? So instead of trying to expand vertically where I don't have any space between these buildings to run a road down, that's kind of a pain in the ass. So at this point, I do try and expand on the left side, and ideally in a pair of 2 at least. So even if you can only get 2 of these expansions, eventually that will become another farm and a 3x4. So that's either a ballista, a butcher, or a goods building. And it doesn't really matter which 2 that you pick, but just make sure that they're connected so that you have the 5+3 vertical, if that makes sense. So now that we've ran that additional set of goods, pick 1 expansion up here, just plant the butcher in there for now, right? You'll end up with a little gap of 4 or whatever, but just plant the butcher in there for now. And then the next time we run a goods collection later on, we'll end up with the third farm that we need. So on a farm note, real quick, you can tell that I still don't have a farm at this point, right? I still have this Tailor plus a tile house in the back, and this, or butcher, sorry, and then this butcher plus a house on the front of this pattern, right? This Tailor is connected by a road on the left side of it, as well as the top half of the road on the right side. But once we add that farm, this would no longer be connected on the right side, right? So it's beneficial just to have this road pattern set up from the beginning so that when you do get to the point of planting that farm, you don't have to really shuffle a whole lot. Makes sense? Let me put these back real quick. So, as I said, I don't have a farm at this point, right? I have 3 arches. We're up to, what, 7 tailors, and then a handful of butchers. I don't have a farm yet, though. Let's break that down. Why not build a farm at this point? Let's break that down real quick. So problem number 1 with planting a farm prematurely, first of all, requires a lot of population. Population demand means happiness demand. And if you scroll back to the original setup up here, the challenge with happiness demand is just space. So you end up deleting butchers or houses in order to plant amphitheaters, just to even break even on your collection. So the problem with having a farm prematurely is that now we can't really delete our supply buildings. Like this is not a building that you would want to delete and replant throughout the settlement, you know. That's a one and done. which also means that the housing that's attached to it is permanent in a sense. Even if it's just tile houses, you can't delete the tile houses because they're attached to the population demand of the farm. Does that make sense? So we've automatically tied up essentially 40 squares worth of buildings that are permanent, right? So it makes it harder to regulate your happiness. Second problem with planting the farm prematurely is that so we've already compared the return on investment of having a cottage versus the tile house, right? And we've already figured out that deleting a tile house and replacing it with a cottage is a net gain of 4,000 coin on the next collection. Whereas planting a second tile house and just omitting the cottage for now is a net gain of 10,000 on the next collection, correct? Or 8,000, whatever it is, on the next collection. So about double the net gain, with fewer supplies and coins invested to begin with. So even with adding the expansions and the extra tile houses, we're still only getting 170,000 coin from collection. So it would take 2 collections to even plant a farm, right? And then assuming we don't rush it, because I don't want to, I'm not going to waste my shards on that. I'm not going to rush it. So I've got to wait 10 hours for it to build, which means I won't even get to collect it until the following collection. So it's going to take me 2 collections to get enough resources to build it, and then skip the collection after that, and then on the 4th collection I'll actually be able to get the return on the investment of that building. Does that make sense? So this is why I do not have farms at this stage in the building or in the settlement. After I open up this fort, or this, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this would be expansion number 6 somewhere on this left side. After I open up the 6th expansion, plant another butcher, and then at this point you can replace this butcher with a tailor at that point, because our temporary placeholder becomes this the butcher on the left side now. So we can add a tailor down here, which gives us a gap of 1 on the left edge of that. And our new temporary building is up here. So that's going to be a butcher or a ballista. And then eventually, once you pair that with another expansion, that'll be a ballista and your 3rd farm eventually. So we're on collection 7 at this point. After collection 6, once we plant that last butcher in there, you should have enough supplies to plant the butcher, which costs virtually 0 coin, right? So at this point, we can actually start going through our housing now and upgrading the housing. So this is where I start, and I kind of skip straight to villas at this point. I might have 2 or 3 cottages planted at this point, but for the most part, it is all tile houses. And at this point, if your population is sustainable with tile houses, it's pretty easy to delete 1 butcher, move all of your tile houses down to that corner, and then plant 4 villas at the same time, okay? So around the same time that we add this expansion, our next collection is just going to be upgrading all of our tile houses straight to villa or cottage. And the cool thing about doing it this way is that we've preemptively put this 3rd arch into the city that is totally overkill, right? For this point in the development. We have 1 here. Let me get my pen real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 houses times 100 each for happiness demand. It's 50 population, but 100 happiness demand is 1300 demand for happiness. But we now have 6 arches at 675 per piece, or 3, sorry. So 3 times 675 provided happiness is 2025 happiness. So the original phases of the settlement where you're constantly swapping out these amphitheaters, delete a butcher, plant an amphitheater, blah, 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 just to maintain your happiness. We've now, with this third arch on this last expansion, we now have a surplus of 700 happiness. So after you get this 6th expansion up here, right here, after we get that 6th expansion, and that's going to consume most of your collection from that round. But the following collection, collection number 8, which is the Bob's, I think that's Bob's final point, is his collection number 8. So our collection number 8 now, we have enough resources and really nothing to spend them on at this point except to upgrade our houses, and we already have the arch number 3. So this entire time where Bob is deleting the tile house and planting the cottage in order to accumulate enough coin production and consistent enough in order to plant a farm, the entire time that Bob has been doing that, we've just been saving our resources, adding more expansions, and planting more houses. And remember, more tile equals better than one cottage, right? So once we get to that point where we've added 6 expansions and we're now racking in all of the resources from that, but we're not spending those resources on the buildings themselves, we're spending it on the expansions. Now we get to the point where we don't have anything to build. We've already planted this temporary thing, run our ballista a few times at this point. And then remember, every time you make a change in your city, okay, I've added this row, so I'm about to plant an arch, but before I do that, I'm going to slide my archer camp over there, run however many repetitions I can afford on the archer camp, and still have enough resources left to plant the arch, move the archer back into this empty pocket, plant the arch that I need, rinse and repeat, right? So at this point, we have a surplus of 700 happiness, so we can actually afford to delete enough to delete 7 tile houses and swap directly over to a cottage. And we would actually break even on happiness considering the surplus that we have. You could alternatively delete like 3 of them and swap directly to villa, and I think you would still break even. That's kind of nuanced shit. That's not super important. The point is, we can afford to upgrade our housing in mass at this stage, and we may not have the available population to delete all of those houses simultaneously. But like I said, just delete the butcher in this bottom right corner, remove the roads, and then we can pack all of this, the housing that we're trying to replace, we can pack all of that into the corner. You're gonna have a fucked up collection the next round, but it's really not a big deal, and it's actually worth the hassle at that point. And then go through and upgrade these houses with cottages and villas. This would be collection number 8 that we're doing this. So the following collection, now that we've upgraded, we're getting 170,000 roughly in supplies every collection, and that's pretty consistent after phase like 5-ish. So after this phase, when we upgrade all of our housing, you'll be getting probably 300,000 coin over right around 200,000 supplies every collection. And this is where it becomes sustainable, because from this point we can delete this pair of butcher and house, plant the farm, and still have 100,000 of each resource left over, right? And then on the next collection, repeat the same thing with the this butcher and tile house pair in the back. And remember, this is a tile house. Like, we're not upgrading these to cottages immediately and consistently like Bob's system, right? These are pretty much all tile houses up until this point. So they're easy to delete. And if you got to delete a pair of house and butcher in order to accomplish the happiness that you need, it costs nothing. And actually, you can collect houses, like I said, down to minus 80 on your happiness scale and still make a profit on the coin side. More profit than you'll make by upgrading them to cottages prematurely. So at this point, we have our resource production is sustainable enough to plant a farm each collection and still have extra resources left over to print. Primarily archer is usually what I end up burning up the most. I print plenty of each type of troop, but archer is usually the one that I'm burning through the fastest, I've noticed. And you've seen my troop count. I've got like, I guess 700-800 combined of the 3 troop types. So that was phase 8, which is Bob's end game, right? So I guess that would be phase 8 plus 9. Bob's game plan ends at 8, but for levels 8 and 9, we're generating around 300,000 over 170 supplies, which is enough to buy, so minus 200, minus 50, so we'll have 100 coin, 120 supplies left over for round number 8, right? And then round number 9, we're replacing the butcher with another farm, so we're going to lose some coin on the house, right? So we're down to 290 coin over, that'd be 230 supplies. Okay. So after we buy our second farm, we'll be down to 90 over 180 supplies. And we'll use the remainder of that to upgrade as much housing as our happiness can afford. And keep in mind, the expansion that we've already bought from, I think is phase 7, the expansion that we've already bought is a butcher, but it's a 4x4 square, so you can fudge that happiness a little bit if you need to. Makes sense? So after we buy our second farm, we're going to get rid of this house. I'm going to move the town hall out of the way real quick just so I can see that change. We'll have farm 1, farm 2, arch in the back, town hall, and this is essentially completed at this point. We have one expansion somewhere over here, right? So if you're still printing archers, you can actually rearrange this bottom group to put your butcher on the bottom, and then run your road to the Tailor instead. That's the other way to do it. But that way, if you do need to print archers, you don't even actually need to delete a butcher or anything. You can just delete one of the tile houses, shift your archer down into that group, print the archers that you need, and then rearrange it. So between the two, it's actually more cost effective to delete the tile house and rearrange the archer. Archer costs 5,000 coins to build plus 2,500 supplies. Tile house only costs 2,500 coins to build, no supply cost, plus the hour it takes to produce. So it's easier just to delete the tile house, shift the archer into its place, and just have this permanently planted in your city, even if it's disconnected. I don't do that with ballista or goods buildings. just because they are big enough to justify deleting after you print what you need out of them. But with the archer, that fits in this pocket perfectly. So anyways, that would conclude, that's the end of phase number 5, or 9, sorry. This is the end of phase number 9. We haven't got this second expansion one left yet, but at this point, we're generating right around 300 over 300 of each resource every collection. Happiness, you should actually still have a surplus of happiness at this point. So usually from here, I use my 10th collection to print another expansion, plant another pair of arches, and then upgrade whatever housing I have left. So let's pause it real quick and get back into my QI city. So at this point I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 villa, 1, 2, 3, 4 cottage, and then enough additional happiness to replace one more cottage with a villa. I don't really need to. Also have enough happiness and enough goods. Remember, I have a full expansion worth of goods to plant a full another expansion, and enough resources to plant another arch, and then 12 decorations or whatever. So there's some flexibility in there at this point where you should have enough happiness to upgrade your housing. If you need the extra coins, you can see that I don't. They're pretty much even. I think my last collection, I replaced one cottage with a villa, so there was some supply. I used more supplies out of the last collection than coin, but typically it's about even on both metrics. So let's get back into edit mode and finish up this little tutorial. Okay, so this is, let's zoom in on this right here. I guess we could actually get rid of that. Let's put our farm in here. That's our permanent reference, right? This would be our second farm down here. Some roads in the way from the original butcher. So we'll have farm 1, farm 2. This is after the 9th collection where we generate our second farm. So the 10th collection, we have 300 of each resource to play with. We'll be able to print our 7th expansion for farm number 3. And at this point, we're getting 350 supplies, 300 coin each collection. So heavy on the supply side. Keep upgrading your housing until you reach parity, and then when you do need the additional happiness to complete that task, just print one more expansion with amphitheater. And at this point, I just do 2 amphitheaters in that expansion, and then start filling in your towers. I don't build the aqueduct. Pound for pound, it is more cost effective. But there's 2 problems with the aqueduct. Let me see, I think I got a Sheepshire that we can use to emulate yeah, so there's aqueduct versus like one of the victory towers or whatever. 2 problems. This is more cost effective on coin supply, as well as happiness drain. Downside is it takes 8 hours to print, and I mean, as lazy as I am, like, yes, I put a lot of effort into my design, but I also sleep through fucking half of my collections, so ultimately I'm really not as much of an overachiever as it sounds like. So part of the problem with the 8-hour process for me is that by the time I actually plant that, the season's probably over anyway, so I wasn't able to capitalize on it. These only take an hour to print, so I'm able to start capitalizing on the attack boost right away. The other advantage with the towers for me is that I get a lot of blue defense from my city naturally, based on the cultural settlements that I've completed, as well as some of my just general building hardware kind of favors the. So Mythical Manor gives 30% blue defense for QI, no red stats in QI though. So just my city hardware itself is naturally inclined towards blue, so I would rather have all victory towers, all red boost in my QI city versus a balance of the both, because I don't really need the blue as much, right? So I'm going to fill these in with victory towers. Plus it actually works with the layout better. If you look at this layout, there's really there doesn't end up being very many gaps at all. It's just the 1x2 at the end of the housing groups there, but definitely not enough vertical gappage to put an aqueduct in there, if that makes sense. So after this, ideally I want at least 3 expansions on the left side, and that is because the roads terminate onto those buildings. But after that, if I can't get the 4th one on the left side, that's not a big deal. From here, I just pick expansions based on path of least resistance, kind of like I said in the chat the other day. Because everything after this, I'm not building any more hardware at this point. Everything after this is just arches and towers, right? And the troops that I need are, this is going to be a butcher, but then delete and plant ballistas when I need ballistas. Delete and plant a goods building when I need to donate goods. Rinse and repeat. This is always just a deletable placeholder. So at that point, I don't have any buildings that I need to buy, right? So if this expansion, one that I would ideally get just because it kind of lines up with that road group, if I can't get that one, I don't care, because it's got a weird obstacles on it or whatever. But if this one doesn't have obstacles, I'll get that one, plant the 2 arches there. I'm not going to clear out obstacles just to plant decorations, so it doesn't really matter where those last few expansions go. I'm going to pause it again. Let me get into QI. I don't know how many expansions I had this one. Let's count them up. So 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 5 on the right side, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on the left, plus 5 at the top there. So 10 expansions total. So that pretty much covers it for my system. I'm going to reset Bob's original game plan and show you what I want to do differently in the future. Alright, so we're back to Bob's original design with my variation of the Tailors, right? The biggest difference between me and Bob happens between collection 4 and 5. That's where we really start going different directions. At the beginning, it's pretty much the same shit. Fucking plant and delete houses or butchers as needed to maintain happiness, which you're getting from these very large amphitheaters, right? That's pretty much universal. At phase 4, though, Bob is using 15 grids, so the 12 that you start off with, plus the 3 expansions, and 25 empty squares, right? And remember, we talked about a lot of the changes that he's making in his city is deleting a tile in order to upgrade to a cottage. So you're over time, that system will gain the return on investment, but in terms of growing quickly, it's actually kind of an impediment, because you're only getting a 4,000 return on the next collection, whereas if you add expansions, which is my strategy. I have 10 expansions that I've added to the original settlement, and the only 2 that I bought with shards were the first 2. The rest of them are from goods. So I'm spending my resources on the extra expansions and filling those expansions with cheap buildings, right? So his output at 4, let's see, I've got it jotted down somewhere. His output at phase 4 is 130 supplies over 80 coin with 25 empty squares. My output at number 4 is 16 grids with 14 empty, and output is around 170 over 120 until we make those first couple adjustments, and then we're at 170 over 170, right? If you scroll back to that. By phase 5, though, that's where it really starts getting squirrely. So on phase 5, Bob's productivity goes down even more. He has the same 15 grids. Oops, sorry. 15, but he now has, I think it's 30. Let's see. Yeah, so it's 30 empty on his phase 5. 2 arches, that's the main thing, right? That's the big landmark where you can actually start making some changes to your city without having to fuck around with the amphitheaters every single collection. So he's got 2 arches, 15 grid squares, 30 empty. On my number 5 collection, I have the same 2 arches, 16 grid squares, with 6 empty, and that's the 1x2 next to the house, and then the chunk of 4 under the butcher that we're using to alternate between butcher, goods, ballista, whatever. And the rest of the city is packed in tight at that point. So that on phase 5, my variation has a net gain of 40 productive squares, essentially. So I have 16 squares more than him, and I'm wasting 24 squares fewer than him. Makes sense? So, let's jump into what I want to do in the future. This is Bob's layout with my variation with the Tailors. Part of the problem, I think, with planning the Tailor right away, I've been doing that every season since Inno made that a possibility. I think most of you guys have been doing the same thing as well. The problem with that is that the Tailor costs 25,000 to plant, 25,000 supplies, but it only produces 19,000 on the first collection. So you're actually at a deficit of 10,000 supplies for the pair of them on your second collection. And the goal is to get 2 arches, right? That's the ultimate goal. And Bob and I are both accomplishing that by phase 5 with some mostly similar building types. I just have more real estate than he does, but our resource output is fairly comparable. I'm getting like 30,000 more on each category than him, but that's not a huge deal, right? The problem with planting these Tailors early on is that what we need in order to plant the arch is supplies. We start off with plenty of coin to plant an arch, but not enough supplies. So the thinking is, I need supplies. I'm going to plant a better supply building in order to reach that arch faster. The problem, though, is that we're burning up 10,000 of the supplies that we need and don't get the return on the investment until the second collection. The other problem is that we've attached ourselves to additional happiness or housing, which requires additional happiness. Same flaw in logic as planting a farm too early. Like, you don't even get your return on investment with the farm unless you rush the initial building in order to let the production timer mesh up with the rest of your city on the following collection. And even then, you only make 16,000 profit over the original cost of the building on the supply side. I had enough resources from the ascended shit in my city to build a farm at opening this current season, and that was a huge mistake, honestly. Let me unfuck my city real quick. Kind of hard to do with boxes all over the place. Anyways, planning farm was a huge mistake. The thinking is we need supplies, so we're going to accelerate supplies on the next collection. That's great. And it worked, right? I built the farm and rushed it, so it was ready for the next collection. The problem is I just spent all 250,000 of my coins at opening, and you start with 150 normally, but if you're getting some from the ascended buildings, whatever, I had 250 to start. And your roads are 1,000 a piece, right? Your houses are 2,500 a piece. Your butchers are 2,500 a piece. So by the time you plant a 200,000 farm on top of it, I literally had, I think, like 2,000 coin available. Like, not enough to plant another house, in other words. So yes, I got a shit ton of supplies on my first collection, right? After everything is planted, 10 hours later, first collection, I got a shit ton of supplies, but I only had 6 houses. So I only got 60,000 coin on my first collection, and still can't afford to buy an arch until the second collection. And at that point, there's no way to even manipulate that to get more coin out of it, because I don't have enough coin to delete a butcher and plant another house in the first place. You know what I mean? So it was totally imbalanced. I won't make that mistake again. Even if you have the ability to plant a farm on opening, I don't think that's the right way to do it. Well, that's definitely not the right way to do it. But I also think that even planting 2 Tailors at opening is not the correct decision. So let's rewind to Bob's system here, because I think Bob was actually ahead of his time, and we all got this update that, oh, now you get an extra 25,000 supplies on opening. So naturally, we're like, yeah, cool. I'm going to use that to plant a Tailor. I still don't think that's the correct option. So let's back up here. Reset this to Bob's original purpose, right? We have 1, 2, 3 amphitheaters, 4 houses, so 200 population, 400 population demand. We're providing 450, so our happiness is taken care of, and then we're consuming 400 population with our butchers, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Assuming you start off with enough coin and supply to plant a farm at the beginning, it's better to actually just not plant the Tailor or the farm or anything at the beginning and just plant Bob's fucking original stupid design. Fuck you, Bob. But here's the advantage. Let's say I start off with 50,000 supplies, which I do. Not including my ascended stuff, that's just bare bones. I get 50,000 supplies at the start of QI. I also get 50,000 or 150,000 coin, just like anyone else, plus whatever permanent effect I'm getting from vagabonds. So usually around 200,000 supply or coins. So 200,000 coin, 50,000 supplies. Just plant Bob's stupid system, and your happiness is on point, so you don't have to adjust anything on the second round. 8 butchers times 10 a pop gives me 80k supplies, plus the 50 that I start with. And the nice thing about following Bob's original template even now after the updates that they've made, is that none of these buildings cost supplies to plant. Whereas if you do plant a Tailor, the 50,000 that you start with is now down to 25, right? So I wouldn't have enough to plant an arch on the first collection. But now, if I go bare bones on the first initial setup, I have 130K, and everything that I've planted consumes coin, but it's not that much. I think it takes like 40,000 to build a basic city. So even if you don't have permanent QI boosts from your main city, you should still have enough left over from the 150 that you start with to plant an arch at this point. So this is my strategy going forward, actually, is to, even though I can plant at least 2 Tailors, and depending on the hardware the temporary hardware, I am able to plant a farm even, and I'm not going to do that anymore. I am actually just going to plant butchers and tile houses. On my first collection, I will be able to plant an arch, right? So my strategy has always been skip the arch early on and use the resources in order to plant the extra expansions that we need in order to jump into the permanent model that we have set up down here, right? That's always been my strategy. But I was thinking about it after the farm blunder, because, you know, it's kind of a gut instinct. I need supplies to get an arch. I'm going to plant the coolest supply building that I can possibly plant at the start. It's kind of intuitive, but then once you actually see how that plays out, it's just not worth the return on investment at the beginning, because the rest of your city is so underpowered that you can't really, it just doesn't balance out, right? So my strategy has always been use the resources to get the extra expansions. I do think it works. I think it works very well, actually, because you do get to this point pretty quickly. But my strategy going forward actually is on the first collection. I can delete all 3 of those amphitheaters, plant my 1 arch, which is essentially my entire collection at this point, but I will be able to plant 1 arch now, and let me adjust this. Delete 1 arch and plant 3 more butchers, as well as 2 more houses, or delete 1 amphitheater, plant 1 arch, sorry. So if you look at Bob's original system, there's an amphitheater. This pair of butcher plus house is 8 tall, so that would be 2 more amphitheater. So there's 1, 2, 3 amphitheater, and then the 4th location down here. Oh, sorry, those are off by 1. So these would be amphitheaters plus the 3rd expansion that we've talked about, right? But I'm actually going to plant the arch. 1, 2 more houses, and then 1, 2, 3 more butchers. Here's what's cool about this, though. Yes, I spent my entire first collection on the arch, right? The trade-off, though, is that I'm actually fucking done with amphitheaters by the second collection. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses planted, so 300 population, 600 demand for happiness. Arch is giving me 675, right? And then almost perfect parity on supplies to butcher ratio. I end up with 25 extra population in this scenario. And at this point, we could actually plant another house just for shits and giggles. Collect and delete 1 house at the next collection, and have perfect happiness balance to collect the rest of it. So the temptation to plant these Tailors early on is with the idea of getting more supplies in the long run, right? More supplies equals generate expansions faster, But think about it this way. I'm going to pause it real quick. I'm going to set it back up. So the way I've been doing it is to use the Tailors early on in order to generate enough resources to plant this fourth expansion, right? But here's another way of looking at it. By using those resources to plant an arch instead of an expansion, you actually eliminate, or you actually create 3 expansions now, correct? And the purpose of planting that 4th expansion is in order to plant a Tailor. But remember, we've talked about the return on investment with Tailor. It costs $25,000 to plant, but you only get $20,000 off of the first collection, right? So the advantage with using, I haven't created this 4th expansion yet, right? But I've repurposed 3 of the expansions that I already had into, instead of creating 1 Tailor on the 4th expansion, I've now created 3 butchers on the original expansions that don't cost supplies to plant in the first place. So now my net return on the upcoming collection is just 30,000 supplies straight across. Whereas if I use the 4th expansion to plant a Tailor, my net return is actually negative 4,000 on the upcoming collection, because I get 20,000, which is great, but it cost me 25,000 to build in the first place. So after this, once that arch is established, I think that will save a lot of fiddle fucking around, deleting butcher, planting amphitheater, so on and so forth. So from here, I think this actually streamlines the process quite a bit. Your next collection would be to print the expansion down here, jump into this model, but we're already kind of ahead of the 8 ball there because we already have part of the arch pair that we need for that final phase, right? Makes sense? So this is my strategy going forward, and I think with the changes that they're making to QI, this will actually be more universally viable for, like, it doesn't matter which guild you're in, because Uprising is going to blast through level 1, like, within an hour, but everyone will still have the ability to farm level 1 tiles until the following day when it resets. Does that make sense? So there's really no impetus to accelerate into ballistas or farms sooner than you need to. This will be my strategy going forward, is actually to, if you have ascended shit, great, that gives you a head start. And in my case, currently, I actually have enough ascended boost at the beginning to plant 2 arches just immediately, right at opening. And instead of planting a farm, I'm going to plant the 2 arches, omit the 3 amphitheaters, and plant a group of butchers and houses instead of the amphitheaters. So I will actually be planting 2 arches on opening and be able to jump into this layout 1 step faster, essentially. Once my ascended shit expires, it'll be back to this second collection system, but you get the idea. Alright, I'll talk to you later. Hope it helped.